Good afternoon. Welcome to WFUZ-TV, the People's Voice podcast. I'm Blair Castro, here with Thomas Jenkins, and we have Mr. Andrew Sorrell in the studio with us. He's running for Alabama State Auditor. Mr. Sorrell, thank you so much for coming all the way to Gulf Shores to be on our show and tell us a little bit about your campaign.
It's great to be down here with you. I love this area of the state. I live in Muscle Shoals, so I am 6 hours north of you. And thankfully, I have lots of reasons to be in Baldwin County. There's a lot of big events down here. There's a huge Republican primary vote down here and across the bay over in Mobile. So I found myself down here probably 8 or 10 times throughout the course of the campaign. But that being said, I always tell people down here, I know what it feels like to be 3 hours from Montgomery. I'm just 3 hours in the opposite direction as you. And I've also told my wife many, many times, if we ever move anywhere else in Alabama, I want to be in Baldwin County. I love this place. I owned rental property down here for a number of years, and any excuse I can get to come to the beach, I generally take it. I'm one of those guys, I love the warm weather. So if it's 96 and sunny, I am happy. My wife doesn't so much love the heat and humidity, but I could definitely see myself living down here. But hoping to live the next 4 years again in Montgomery, which is what I call my second home. But when people ask me where you're from, I never say Montgomery. I am from Muscle Shoals. Yes, I do live the majority of my life in Montgomery. As your current state auditor, have enjoyed doing that the last 4 years, hoping to do it again for another 4 years. But I consider myself a Muscle Shoalsian, if that's the way you say that. And I go home every weekend. I think in 3.5 years, I might have stayed over 3 weekends in Montgomery. But, everything that I really care deeply about is back at home. Both sets of my kids' grandparents are back at home. My church is back home. My businesses are back home. So we make it a practice to go back home on the weekends.
That's awesome. So you got your start. I guess let's go back to the beginning. What made you get involved in politics? I know you were a state rep. So starting with that, what was kind of your trajectory and what made you decide to initially run for auditor?
Yeah, it started a long time before that. My story goes all the way back to 2009 when Barack Obama got sworn in as president of the United States. And I had started a college textbook company, and I was working in my parents' screen porch, and we had a radio in there. And just out of kind of boredom, I turned on the radio and started listening to Rush Limbaugh, Glenn Beck, Sean Hannity, Dave Ramsey, all the big talk radio personalities. And I'd say that helped shape my political philosophy, because before I always voted Republican. My parents drilled it into me. My parents are not political people, but my parents always made sure, hey, you're going to go vote. You turned 18, go register to vote. And I've never missed an election. That includes municipals and everything. I've always understood the importance of voting, but they never drove me into politics. In fact, they kind of scratched their heads and wonder how their son ended up in politics. And I'll get more to that in a second, my parents' background and everything. But through listening to Rush Limbaugh, I really realized there's so many reasons to be a Republican. And, I was raised in a Christian home with dad being a preacher. I voted Republican because we were Christians. But, there's a million other reasons to vote Republican as well. And I'd say that Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity and Glenn Beck educated me. And then I just got motivated, man. They started the Tea Party wave, started in 2009. I distinctly remember taking my tea bag and mailing it to my congressman in 2009. So that's where I got started. In fact, I'll be speaking at a group tonight that sprung out of the Tea Party movement, the Common Sense campaign. They were an old Tea Party group. And then I realized, man, the area I live is completely controlled by the Democrats. I moved over to Florence. I attended UNA. And in Florence, there were something like 28 elected officials in Lauderdale County, and 27 of them were Democrats. So I got involved in the local party. I went, and a friend of mine said, you should run for the Lauderdale County Republican Executive Committee. And I said, what's that? And here I am, 23 years old. And he said, well, you pay $25 and you get your name on the ballot, which I thought, hey, that sounds kind of cool. And I ended up being unopposed, so my name didn't go on the ballot. But anytime you take a sure win in politics, you just take it, right? You don't wish for an opponent. But I signed up for this committee, not even fully understanding what it was, got involved in the county committee in 2010 and began working local races. And then in 2014, I ran for the state executive committee, and in a 4-way race, I managed to win that, running against some bigger name people. And people did not expect to. Here I was, 27 or so at the time. They did not expect me to be able to pull that off and win. But I did. Got a seat on the state committee. I've been on that ever since 2014. Now serve as the bylaws chairman for the Alabama Republican Party. Been doing that for 5.5 years. We've passed 40 bylaws. I'm 40 for 40. One of them took me 2 tries, but all 40 bylaws that my committee has brought forth to the full body have passed. So I've been in the party a long time, worked a lot of races as a kind of a volunteer campaign manager and consultant, and flipped a lot of seats in North Alabama from Democrat to Republican. Then began eyeing House District 3. And in 2014, my predecessor at state rep, Marcel Black, was reelected with less than 60% of the vote for the first time. And I remember thinking, that's a winnable seat for a Republican in 2018. I've got to find a Republican who will run. And you know what? Nobody wanted to run against a 28-year incumbent who had all the money in the world and in a seat that had been blue for 150 years. And finally, kind of out of frustration, I said, I'll run then. If no one else will do it, I'll step up and run. So I did. And that's my story of how I got into politics. And while in the legislature, I ended up, obviously, you figured out the story. I did win the race. I got 52% of the vote. I was the narrowest win in the state house in 2018, just barely slid in there. And while in the legislature, my predecessor, who lives right here in Baldwin County, Jim Ziegler, he asked me if I would carry some legislation dealing with the state auditor's office, and that got me interested in it. And I qualified. There was 5 of us initially in the race for state auditor in 2022. I was at last place in the polling at 3%. But I slowly worked my way up, set a fundraising record for state auditor at the time in 2022, ended up making it into a runoff and winning the runoff in June of 2022. And there was no Democrat running. So it was for all intents and purposes over, just waiting for the general election in 2022. So that's kind of my story, how I got to be sitting between y'all today.
So what does a state auditor do exactly?
Great question. It depends on what state you're in. And it's the same thing you'll find for the treasurer's offices. The treasurer has widely varied duties around, and it's all crafted by whatever individual states, whatever legislation assigns them duties. That's what they end up doing. The duties of the auditor in Alabama are very different from the duties of the auditor in Nebraska. Like my friend Mike Foley, who used to be auditor up there, we've talked about this. But what the Alabama auditor does, which I think is what's relevant to your viewers here today, are really 3 big things. We have 3 duties. Number 1, we track all the state's property. I don't mean real estate. I mean personal property. So a pickup truck, iPad, shotgun, Aldot equipment, anything of value that's non-consumable that costs $500 or more goes on the property rolls. There are 300,000 inventory items. There's 180 different state boards and agencies that we audit. I mean, literally from the governor's office on down, we audit. There are some agencies that have only 1 or 2 pieces of property. There are agencies that have $69 million worth of property, like Department of Corrections. By the way, they got a perfect audit. They were not missing a single piece of inventory out of $69 million. And I like to brag on former Commissioner Ham because that's really, really impressive that he was able to do that. Then I also joke that the problem with our prisons is not stuff going out of the prisons. It's what's going into the prisons.
Yeah.
It's a much bigger problem.
For sure.
But we audit the state's property, $1.3 billion worth of taxpayer property that we keep track of and make sure it's not getting lost. And we have a really good track record of doing that. I also appoint, I have 69 appointments, all election related appointments in Alabama, 69 different people I appoint to various boards and whatnot, most of those being Board of Registrars members who register you to vote, keep the voter rolls clean. That's their job. And I serve on the Board of Adjustment. So you can't sue the state of Alabama. So if you have a claim against the state, you have to put it in with the Board of Adjustment. And your auditor, your treasurer, your secretary of state, and your finance director, the 4 of us serve on that board. And whoever is currently serving as chairman, their vote counts double in the case of a tie.
Is that an immunity that's unique to the state of Alabama?
No, pretty much all states have in their constitutions that you can't sue their state. The federal government, same thing. You can't sue the federal government. So yeah, they give themselves that protection. However, the legislature did realize the inherent unfairness of that system.
Yeah.
And they created this Board of Adjustment to adjust claims against the departments of the state. And we have a wide variety of claims that come in. We had a claim for $5 million last year, and it was a wrongful death claim. Someone said that the state troopers failed to properly administer first aid on the side of the highway, and someone died. We heard all the details in that case. We ended up voting to deny that claim because it turns out the ambulance had been there. The first responders, they had tried to revive the individual several times, were unsuccessful. They were passed away long before the troopers ever got there. So we didn't think that was the troopers' fault. So we voted no on that claim. And we have, on the other end of the spectrum, we had a claim for $17 of tuna fish from a prisoner. Prisoners actually have property rights and they can buy things in the prison commissary, and you send Uncle Bobby some money and he can go buy himself some tuna fish in the prison, and they have a right to that stuff. And if they're moved or transferred, that property, you fill out a property sheet, that property is supposed to move with you. And the tuna fish got lost in the shuffle. And so I voted to pay that one because I said, nobody lies about $17 a tuna fish. He has to be telling the truth. If you were going to lie, you'd put $170 at least, right? So we paid him. He got his tuna fish. So everything in between. I mean, there's quarters we get $30 million worth of claims that come in, and we have to sit there. And we had a big one this quarter with $750,000 claim that we're still debating amongst the four of us, what to do on that claim.
What motivates you to do something like that? That seems like a very monotonous chore to go through line items like that, especially at that level.
It's funny. People are like, wait a minute, you're the state auditor and you're the bylaws chairman for the Alabama Republican Party. Like, could you possibly pick two more boring jobs than what you pick? But, they're really not boring. Once you get into it and start doing it, I enjoy it. My predecessor as bylaws chairman was a man named Albert Peters. He was bylaws chair for something like 40 years. And I was his protege. He taught me everything I know about the bylaws. And I remember, but before he passed away a couple of years ago, I'd been elected bylaws chairman. I called and said, do you want to do this again? He said, no. I said, why don't you do it? And I'll just be on the committee. And I said, okay. So it was pretty intimidating because every single bylaw change we were debating, he would say, well, I wrote that one back in 1987. And so it was tough, but he was good to me, but he was always respectful. He would never call me out in front of the group, but we would get off the phone, I'll get off our conference calls, and he would call me right after, and he would say, Mr. Chairman, here's the 3 things you did wrong during this meeting. And he would go through and know. But no, I enjoy bylaws chairman. I enjoy being the state auditor. And I'd love to do it again for another 4 years.
So I just have a practical question because I'm actually really interested in this. I didn't even really think about this as a role that people do. When you're doing an audit of all this state inventory and physical things, do you have people that go out on site, like people from your office, to put eyes on a lot of this?
Absolutely. Yeah, we don't check it in unless we put eyes on it. Or in some cases, if someone will text us a photograph. So for instance, there's an elected official who has a vehicle and he lives about 3 hours from Montgomery. We do not make him drive the car to Montgomery to prove that he has it. We will accept a picture of the VIN number, a picture of the vehicle, and his sworn statement that he has it in his possession. Things like a cell phone for the lieutenant governor. I'm not going to go physically say, pull it out of your pocket, sir, I need to see it. So, but other than that, yes, we are physically looking at every piece of state property and making sure that it's there. And I'll tell you this, we've made the process a lot more efficient because we have now RFID chipped all 300,000 items.
Oh, wow.
So if we had 37 items in this house that were state government property, we could come up with a scanner and just in a matter of minutes, we'd have all of them. And we just go look for the one that's missing rather than, the old thing of crawling under the desk and looking for the label and scanning it. Mm-hmm. Those days, thankfully, are pretty much over. And the way we do it now, used to we'd take, 5 weeks to do some of the larger audits. We're doing them in 2.5 now. So we're more efficient. We've got fewer auditors than ever before. I think we're running more efficiently than ever before. And more importantly, we're losing less property.
So in the history of not necessarily being in an office, but being around that circle, have you heard of anything major coming up missing that was of interest?
Oh, there's definitely big stuff missing. We helped uncover, there was an agency that had some vehicles, some historic type vehicles like Corvettes and stuff from the 70s. Mm. And they were missing when we did their audit. And we said, well, where did these go? And they said, oh, well, one of the directors at the agency actually purchased it. And we're like, you can't do that.
Right.
And of course, as you might guess, it was purchased for $15,000 and the value was $50,000. And so that was a problem. And we informed the examiners of public accounts. By the way, the examiners, they went in and investigated them. They found all kinds of problems. The entire board was fired by the governor just a few months ago. You can go read about this. The entire board got fired by the governor. And now there's been criminal charges filed against some of those individuals. So yes, stuff comes up missing. Like you can't just take state property and just willy-nilly sell it off to whoever you want. There's a process and it goes through us. You got to send it to state surplus, which is run through ADECA. They've got a location in Eva, Alabama, up in Morgan County, or they've got a location here in Montgomery. And that stuff all goes on govdeals.com and gets auctioned off so that the state actually recoups the money that we're supposed to recoup. We don't want sweetheart deals for friends. We don't want people getting pickup trucks for $5,000. And that's all coming out of taxpayers' pockets, and it's wrong. And so we have uncovered some things. I've also had cases where we've caught people destroying state property. So I had a Department of Public Health employee whose job it was to take inventory to surplus and unload it there for them to then auction off. He gets there, there's a line, there's nobody to help him unload. He just backs up the box truck, starts throwing stuff off the back of the box truck onto the concrete floor. Destroys over $20,000 worth of your equipment. Wow. And he did it on video. So my staff's like, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? And I said, I'm going to wait and see what his supervisor does first. This will be interesting. So his supervisor, they have to fill out like a property form, a disposal form, and tell us what happened. And there's a corrective action taken section of that form. And his supervisor told him to be more patient next time.
Wow.
Wow, that's really holding people accountable there. Great job. Wow. So we contacted him. I reached out and I said, this is not acceptable. He said, well, what do you think I should do? I don't know. Fire him. How about that? That's what I would do as a business owner. I would fire him. Well, it's hard to fire government employees. So I said, well, put the guy on a repayment plan, have him pay us back, start withholding it out of his check. So they did. They put him on a repayment plan. Guess what happened after his first paycheck?
He quit.
He quit. So I didn't get all your money back, but at least he doesn't work for the state. He's not going to destroy any more property. But we're holding people accountable now for the negligent loss of state property.
Circling back, how and for what purpose does the state acquire a classic car?
For museums.
Oh, gotcha.
Yeah, it's just for museums. That'd be the only reason. Yeah.
Gotcha. So not like for governor personal transport.
Oh, no.
I was like, wait a minute, classic car.
Although the governor does have 3 houses. There's the Winton Blunt Mansion, there's the governor's mansion, and down here in Fort Morgan, there's the governor's beach house. And we do audit all 3 of those. It was a very convenient excuse for me to get to take a tour of all 3 of them. Thankfully, the guy at the Capitol, he's over capital operations, and he handles all the repairs and maintenance and stuff. He also is over all 3 of the governor's properties, the security, everything. So he was nice enough. I said, hey, I'd really love to see the governor's beach house. We're auditing them next week. Can I come down and see it? He took me on a tour. So that's
going to take me overnight.
Yeah.
So those, I guess, will pass along to the next governor. That's pretty cool. I didn't even know that or think about that.
Yeah, they sure will. They sure will. The Winton Blunt Mansion was donated by Winton Blunt, who I think he ran for governor back in the 70s. Very wealthy man. And it's the same way it was. It hasn't been updated, remodeled, etc. It looks exactly the same as it did in the 1970s. So it's kind of frozen in time, which is kind of neat.
So I wanted to ask a little bit about your background before politics. What did you study? What kind of was your background before you really jumped into this when you talked about the Barack Obama thing, prior to that? Yeah,
entrepreneurship. I'm a businessman. I started off working at Chick-fil-A in 10th grade, $5.15 an hour. And saved up $2,000, started my first business with my brother. That's our college textbook company. Company did very well. We had 30 employees in my mid-20s. We were doing $9 million in revenue. Things were just really, really going well. And we hit the internet sales at the right time. 2004 was a great time to start selling anything on the internet, but college textbooks especially. And we timed it right. We kind of had a vision for, hey, brick and mortar bookstores are not going to be a thing in 20 years. We need to get on the internet. So we did. Now, the industry's changed even more. Now it's all ebooks. So Pearson doesn't even hardly publish a book anymore. It's all ebooks now. So, once again, we're going to have to innovate. But that was our first company, and then took the profits from that company, and we opened up our second company, which is Gold Guns and Guitars. And we have 2 gun stores. We have one in Florence, and we have one in Huntsville. And Lord willing, we'll have another one in June. We're buying one in Decatur. We're under contract, still working out some of the finer details and negotiating, but I think we're going to be able to close on that in June. And I've got some rental properties scattered around. So anyway, I'm not in politics for the paycheck. I do this because I enjoy it and not because I need it. I'd probably make more money if I wasn't in politics. But, somebody asked me today, why didn't you grow your businesses bigger before you got started in politics? And I said, well, if I'd stayed in business and been successful and made more money, you know what I would have wanted to do later in life? Run for public office. I'm already doing what I would have wanted to do anyway. So why would I'm happy I did it in the order I'm in. I'm happy to be where I am, and hope the voters give me another opportunity to serve for another 4 years.
So you had a really cute ad. I loved your ad with your wife and your family. You're auditing your household. Can you tell us about how that idea came and a little bit about your family helping make that ad for you?
That idea was actually born out of desperation 4 years ago. So So I was doing very well fundraising 4 years ago, but my polling was very, very stubborn to move up. So as I raised a lot of money, one candidate ended up dropping out of the race. So we were down to 4. Then on qualifying day, which is the last day you can sign up to run, one of the gentlemen who actually lives in the same county as me, so I'm very glad he exited the race because we would have split the North Alabama vote. He decided instead of qualifying for auditor, he was going to run for Public Service Commission. So thankfully he did that and he exited the race, which was a big surprise to me. So now all of a sudden there's only 3 of us in the race. But the other 3, both of them had run statewide before. One of them multiple times. So I was starting off at a huge name ID disadvantage. And so I go up on air with my traditional kind of faith, family, freedom type ads, kind of what I call a typical cookie cutter political ad. Moves the numbers, but it's not particularly memorable. Maybe it builds you some name ID. And I start creeping up in the polling. And the polling at the time was 45, 35, 20. And I was 20. And I creep up to about 30. Well, the guy at 35 starts falling down and I pass him and I'm up at 33 or so and he's at 28. This is about a month out from the election. Then I put up a new ad and the public obviously did not like the ad I put up. And I start slipping in the polling. And pretty soon I find myself back in 3rd and now I'm down. He's at 35 and I'm at 28. And I'm like, I'm not even gonna make the runoff here. So we were at this point 2 weeks out from the election. I'm panicked. I've spent the most money in the race by far. I'm still in 3rd place and I can't figure out what's wrong. And I talked to my brother on the phone. He said, I don't think people like your ad. You need a better ad. He said, you are on TV. You're dominating your opponents on airtime, but people don't like your ad. So I went outside and I was picking up pine cones in my backyard and just praying for an idea or a miracle so I could make the runoff. Because I had given up a seat that I knocked 11,000 doors to be elected to state house. I poured my heart and soul into flipping House District 3 in 2018, and I was risking that and giving it up to run for state auditor. And the Lord gave me an idea for a commercial. And it was, hey, nobody knows what the state auditor's office does. Why don't I explain those duties to my baby? I had a 6-month-old baby at the time. So we filmed it. And all the political consultants said, do not do this. Terrible idea. Stick with your ad, just run more of the bad ad kind of suggestions. And I said, no, I'm going to try this because something needs to change. So we filmed it. It was me pushing Liberty in the swing, and then I'm out there grilling, and she's sitting in a high chair with her chef hat on and her fork and spoon in her mouth or in her hands. And we filmed that ad, popped it up. We only had it up. By the time we got it filmed and produced and on TV, it was only 5 days until the election. But that ad shot me into 1st place.
Wow.
So I ended up getting 39%. The 2nd place guy got 33, made the runoff. And I said, well, we got to do another ad like this for the runoff. So we did part 2. And we put that up and I ended up winning the race. So I like to do different ads than what other politicians do because I think they stick out and they're more memorable. And again, I want to jokingly, in a sense, inform people about what the auditor's office do because people don't really know. So I talked about it's the ad. If you haven't seen the ad is my wife saying, please reelect my husband. If you don't, he's going to come home and start auditing at home. And I'm in there like counting my daughter's like stuffed animals and I'm counting the diapers in the baby drawer and stuff like that. That's kind of the humor of the ad. And that ad, again, has just done tremendous for me. I've gotten really good feedback on that ad all over the state.
I thought it was really memorable. I'll drop it in the comments too so you guys can watch it.
Yeah, please watch it.
So kind of a follow-up question to that. Either recently this week was kind of a negative ad about you.
Yes.
Do you have anything you'd like to say to address that, to kind of clear things up or let people have an opportunity to hear what, your response is about that?
Sure. Well, first of all, it's not true. And second, he wouldn't be going negative if he was leading in the polls. And that's just the truth. When people are ahead in the polls, they don't go negative. Why would you? So, our polling was looking strong. He was running a lot of positive ads, really, 2 or 3 times as many TV ads as we were running. His polling was not really responding. And so I guess he decided to go negative on me and throw some mashed potatoes up against the wall and see what sticks. And the story there is that I had a friend who I trusted. I invested some money with the guy. Turns out he was dishonest. He stole the money. He was running basically a Ponzi scheme with it. And I lost my money. Thankfully, not a life-changing amount of money. I learned a good lesson, but you don't get where I am in business and politics without taking risk. And I've taken risk in my life. Some have worked out, some haven't worked out. And also, he was one of the donors to my campaign. So, the headlines read like state auditor's largest donor, is running Ponzi scheme. Terrible, terrible. Of course, I didn't know. I had nothing to do with it. It was very, very unfortunate what happened. And I refunded every penny that I ever got from the guy for this campaign. I wrote him a check and I sent it back not to him. I sent it to the court-appointed receiver so the other victims of the scheme could get their money back. Well, my opponent decided to take that and twist it into that I was like somehow participating in running this Ponzi scheme, which is one of the most dishonest, disingenuous political attacks that I have ever seen. So we put a response out. And maybe you can drop a link to that one in the comments too. But we put a response video out to that. The allegations are untrue, and I think he's just getting desperate.
Yeah, and from what I understand, the Ponzi scheme guy, he gave money to multiple candidates, and I think a lot of them returned the money as soon as this all came to light. I don't think that's unique to you, and I know that
definitely not. He gave money to 300 candidates.
Yeah.
So yeah, this is definitely not unique to me. I was a small chunk of the millions or so of dollars that he donated to political candidates. There were 6 other candidates in Alabama who had to return money, but none of the other candidates are candidates for statewide office, and that makes a whole lot more headlines.
Yeah. So aside from the fact that you have done this job before and you have the experience, what are some other qualifications that you think people should vote for you over your opponent? What makes you unique for this role?
Yeah, I think look at my service in the legislature. So anytime you have somebody running for office, for the first time, you can listen to what they say they're going to do. We all know how politicians will say one thing and do another when they get elected. You don't really know if someone's telling the truth until you've elected them and you see what they do. Now, some people, like Donald Trump, told us what he was going to do in 2016 and then did it. What a surprise. Well, guess what? I'm another one of those kinds. I said I was going to vote against the gasoline tax in 2019. That was a hot issue on the 2018 campaign trail. I was very clear where I was going to be on that issue. I'm a no on increasing taxes, especially because 88% of my district said that they were a no on it. I did a telephone poll, got 600 responses. 88% said no. So my first vote as a legislator is not going to go against 88% of my district. I was young, I was 32, but I wasn't stupid.
Yeah.
I knew better, and I'm philosophically opposed to higher taxes. Once in the legislature, not only was I effective at helping restore people's constitutional right to bear firearms, through the constitutional carry legislation that I carried for 4 years. But I was rated Alabama's most conservative legislator 3 out of the 4 years that I was there. So you can check any of 4 different scorecards: the American Conservative Union, the Club for Growth, Alabama Policy Institute put a scorecard out. All these different groups rated my social conservatism, they rated my fiscal conservatism, and I was always either first by myself or tied for first in all of the scorecards. Got a Conservative Policy Warrior Award in 2020 from the Alabama Policy Institute. So basically what I would say is you can trust me that I'm going to do exactly what I tell you I'm going to do. If I tell you I'm going to put conservative Republicans on the board of registrars, that's exactly what's going to happen, because I'm serious about election integrity. When Democrat statewide officials were appointing registrars in this state, we had a lot of counties where there were more registered voters than there was population. We don't have that problem anymore because now you have Republicans doing the appointment. So people can trust what I tell them. I've got an 8-year track record, and I've been very, very consistent. I like to say I'm Montgomery's most consistent politician. And I remember the former speaker, Mac McCutcheon, one day I was in his office and we disagreed on a lot of issues, but he said, "Andrew, I'll tell you one thing." He said, "I can always predict how you're going to vote." He said, "I'll look down the calendar of bills we're voting on. I'll say, Sorrell's going to be a no on those 2 bills." And he said, because you're so consistent in the way that you vote. And I appreciated him recognizing that and saying that. And even though he didn't agree with my no votes all the time, he appreciated my consistency.
That's awesome. And I think a lot of people don't realize too that there is sort of, I've worked in politics for a long time in another state, but it bodes well when you have a track record and you have that trajectory of not just shooting straight to the top. I think you do sort of, for me, it develops stronger background there when I'm casting my vote, when I see somebody who worked their way up from state rep to this position to that position, and also has involvement with the party, because I question, motives of people that aren't deeply involved with the party sometimes, if they're truly with our same intentions there.
You have people who get involved in the party 6 months before they decide to run for office themselves. And you're like, well, you're only here helping. You're not here for the cause. You're not here to advance conservatism. You're not here to help get Republicans elected generally. You're here so you can get elected. And, when I joined the party in 2010, running for political office was the furthest thing from my mind. I mean, I thought I was going to be a consultant or a volunteer. I never imagined I would actually be the candidate. Didn't even know that I would make a good candidate, frankly. But, the more politicians I hung out with, the more that I helped run races and stuff, I finally figured out all politicians are just normal people. They really are. I mean, there's nothing particularly special. Yes, they may be talented. Some of them may be good looking or whatever. But at the end of the day, they're all people. They all make mistakes. And pretty soon, the more politicians you hang out with, the less impressed you are. I'll just put it that way.
Oh, yes, I definitely. We're on I think you're our 74th episode. So we were thinking about that. We're almost about to hit 75. So it's like, man, it really humanizes a lot of the time when you see the different people. And it gives us a really good perspective, I think, because it is intimidating when you first get involved. And then once you do it so much it's like, oh, yeah, they are just normal people.
No, that's exactly right. They really are. Politics is one thing where you don't have to have any special credentials to do it. And that's so unique. I mean, if you want to be a lawyer, guess what? Go pass the bar. If you want to be an accountant, go to school and study and be a CPA. You want to be a politician? You can be anything you want. You can be a businessman. You can be a preacher. There's some preachers in the legislature. You can be a public school teacher. You can be a plumber. I got a plumber elected chairman of the Lauderdale County Commission. We beat the Chamber of Commerce president with a plumber because he was a genuine person. We went to the fish fry, and our opponent showed up in a suit to a fish fry, looking very stuffy. My opponent shows up, gets out of his work truck, just got off work. We go into the event, we're handing cards out, and somebody says, the toilet's clogged. And we can't get it fixed. Toilet hadn't worked here in a month. Danny goes out to his truck, he gets his tools, he goes in, he unclogs the toilet. Danny left that day. I'm telling you, he had every single vote from the fish fry because the people said, oh my goodness, he came in here and fixed our toilet for free rather than he came here to serve rather than to just grab our votes and leave and we never see him again. Mm-hmm. And watching people like Danny Pettis campaign really taught me a lot of how you win locally. I remember riding around in a truck in 2014 with Rick Singleton. He was running for sheriff of Lauderdale County. And at the time we'd had a Democrat sheriff for, 140 years. And Rick Singleton's running. And Rick Singleton would stop in at every little country store and he'd buy a Coca-Cola or a candy bar. And there'd be 2 or 3 people in the store. He would go speak to all of them. The person at the register knew who he was because that was the 4th time he had stopped in there. And we're talking about a county of 93,000 people. And I thought, wow, this is how you win. It's not going to the Chamber of Commerce events. So when I went to a political event in 2017, it was a North Alabama Council of Local Governments, NACOG. So you're going to have all your commissioners, you're going to have your legislators, you're going to have sometimes your congressman will be there, you're going to have your city council members. They're all going to be at this NACOG meeting because it's all the local governments getting together and having a powwow. And I went in there and here I am. I'm 31 years old. I'm kind of honestly, I'm a nobody. I'm handing out my cards. None of the elected officials give me the time of day because my opponent is a community college president. So I felt like a fish out of water. So I told Hannah, I said, this is not the right strategy. I said, I'm going to go outside. There's some guys I saw grilling steak outside for the event. I'm going to go talk to them. So I got outside and I get talking to him. And turns out, he's the president of the local Cattlemen's Association. Go figure. 4 or 5 guys out there, I visit with them. And they told me at the end, they said, every other politician walked past us because we're just the guys cooking the food. They said, you came out here and actually talked to us. We want to support you. What can we do? And I got 77% in that primary.
Wow.
And the 23%, probably the crowd that didn't want to talk to me, didn't want to give me the time of the day. But the actual real people that live in and make up a district, the majority of people are not city councilmen. The majority of people, they go vote maybe, but they're not really political. And I always tell people, look, if government's doing their job right, you shouldn't even be thinking about politics. You only think about politics when somebody's doing their job wrong. That's when you hear about it. That's when it makes the news. If your trash is getting picked up on time, if your streets are clean, if crime is low, you call 911 and they're there in 2.5 minutes, you don't think about government. You don't complain about government. But when you start having boys using the girls' restroom in your local public school, now all of a sudden people get political real fast because they care.
That's such a good point. I think that speaks volumes. And it also means a lot that you're here all the way in Gulf Shores and you're making the rounds and you're going out and you're talking to everybody. we always said that when we first started our podcast, we had problems with our county government, and it kind of, was able to see things, different systemic failures, I guess, all the way up the chain there. But it was all about being heard and being listened to, and not overlooking those people who are sitting in the corner of the room, maybe not as flashy or saying something, and not overlooking the little guy there, because that little guy, you don't know who they are. They might have a ton of power, and they might be the people that, that person's squared, like they know multiple people, and it's crazy that people, I think candidates overlook that a lot of the time to focus on the one big wig in the room.
You never know who you're talking to. I was doing a tour for Bayshore Christian Academy, a local school here. One of the moms called me up and said, "Hey, I heard you do these Capitol tours." And I said, "Yes, I do." And I said, "It's election season. I'm really busy." And she said, "Would you please take the time to do a tour? I've got 30 kids coming and probably 30 parents." And I said, "I can't say no. Yes, I'll do it. Come on up. I'm going to give you an hour and a half tour of the Capitol," which after this airs, I'm going to get a bunch of Capitol tour requests. They come up, I do a tour. Well, I get talking to a guy on the tour, and he said, "Oh, I'm friends with the Mississippi State Auditor." And we kind of hit it off, and he gives me his card, and he said, "Oh, call me sometime." So a couple days later, I reach out and I call him. And long story short, he ends up donating me $10,000. I had no idea who he was, what he did, the kind of success he's had in business and everything. I had no idea. I just thought he was a dad there with his daughter for the tour. So just goes to show you don't know who you're talking to. Be nice to everyone. Everyone's vote counts the same. Yep. A lot of candidates, they want to go get if I can just get the majority of the county commission to vote for me. Who cares if the count? I mean, I'll take those votes count too, but like the people who don't go to any political events ever, those are the people who decide the election.
Yeah, I've had so many instances where good things happen from specifically going to do something that I really deep inside did not want to do.
Yeah, it's like you're on your sixth event of the day, you're tired, your baby's screaming in the car, and you're like, "Oh, maybe I should just skip this one." And you're like, "No, I said I'd be there. I'm going to be there." You go in, and sure enough, you make that one connection you needed, or you find that donor, or whatever. Yeah, there's a rule. Morton Blackwell runs the Leadership Institute in Arlington, Virginia. Conservative. Have y'all ever been there or heard of this?
I actually have 17 certifications from the Leadership Institute, so I was trained through them, yeah.
Well, I'm not telling you anything you don't know, Ben. But one of his laws of the public policy process is never miss a meeting you might regret missing later. And that is, if I've ever skipped a meeting, turns out I should have been there. I would have been the key vote or whatever. So, I've learned, I've got the laws of the public policy process actually framed in my office just so I remember them. But I started a Leadership Institute too back in 2010. So.
Well, that's awesome. Do you have anything else you want people to know, and tell people where to find you and remind them, when to vote and everything, if you would like to?
Yes, I'll say this. I'm sure your audience is all like, "Boy, this guy, he sounds good. He's done a good job as state auditor. Maybe I'll consider voting for him." But they have one pressing question they still need answered. How do I know that this guy is patriotic? If he could just convince me he's patriotic, I might vote for him. I have an answer for you. I have 3 children, and we named them Liberty, Glory, and Justice. So if that doesn't convince them, I don't know what will. If that does, we'll have another one. So give me another political name, and we'll come up with something else. No, in all seriousness, the election is Tuesday, May 19th. I have one opponent on the Republican primary ballot. I humbly ask for your vote, your support. I've enjoyed serving the last 4 years. I want to do it again. And I promise you'll get more consistent conservatism from me if you put me back in there.
All right. Thank you so much for coming out.
Yeah, enjoyed the discussion. Thank y'all for having me.
Yes, sir.